No. We'd be most happy to hear your learned opinion, wouldn't we, Dr. Kyra?
Yes. Yes. Dr. Adrian is very renowned in his field.
As I see it, there's altogether too much emphasis these days upon surgery. Everything, from a broken leg to the vapors. Now, while I do believe that surgery is necessary in some cases, I prefer the more conservative approach to medicine.
You mean a special potion for every ailment?
Yeah, or leeches.
Huh?
Oh, except, of course, in the case of the common cold. Oh, that misfortune still has myself and others in my field stumped.
I like our visitor, Kyra. Do your best to keep him here.
I look forward to working with you, Doctor. Yes.
Thank you.
I look forward to working with you, Doctor.
You are a great help.
And welcome back to Ape Nation, your number one source for all things Planet of the Apes on YouTube. My name is Josh, and today I'm giving my review of episode 7 of the short-lived 1974 TV series Planet of the Apes. If you like what I do here and want to show your support, be sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things apes. As you all know by now, this is a series of reviews following every episode of the 1974 TV show, all leading up to a full series review later this year to celebrate the 50-year anniversary of the show. If you haven't seen my reviews of any of the previous episodes, you can check all of them out right here. And for those who want to follow along with my reviews, or if you just haven't seen the show and want to check it out for yourself, I've put a link down in the description where you can watch the show totally free. And as always, for everyone who has not seen the show and don't want to be spoiled just yet, I'll start with my general thoughts at the beginning of the video before going a little bit deeper and diving into some of my more detailed thoughts on the episode. So if you want to know my thoughts, but you don't want to be spoiled just yet, you can watch the first part of this video, click off the video, go watch the episode, and then come back to this video to hear the rest of what I have to say about the episode. So with all of that said, let's dive into Planet of the Apes, episode 7, The Surgeon. When Virdon is seriously injured, Galen risks his freedom and his life by contacting his old girlfriend, now an expert surgeon, Kyra. Though she is resistant to helping a human at first, Galen manages to convince her, and with the assistance of Burke, continues to break down the barriers between humans and apes as larger questions are raised among ape scientists and doctors about the human world that once existed. So I will say now, I think this could be my new favorite episode. I loved this episode of the show. It is, if not my second favorite episode, at the very least it's tied for number 1 with episode 3, The Trap, which I also loved about as much as this. My favorite thing about this episode, which is something I've been wanting from this show since the first one, is that we finally get a Galen-centric episode. This is the most time that we have spent with Galen so far, and I loved every single minute of it. There's a really sweet relationship between Galen and this new character Kyra that gets introduced, and the character of Kyra, I'm also a big fan of. I loved her from the start. I love where they take her. I love her character development. I love her arc in this episode. I like the dynamic that they introduce and play around with her and Galen. And that relationship between Galen and Kyra, it's something that I'd heard about prior to watching the show from other fans, but I just wasn't expecting to be as into it as I was. I was so enamored, so moved by this relationship, and I really hope that we get to see more of her in the future. I know we probably won't, but I'd love to see more of her. As for the story in this episode, like I said up top, it's about Virdon who gets injured, he gets shot, and he has to be taken to a surgeon for help to save his life, and that pretty much is where the plot of everything kind of ends, aside from some stuff they have to do in order to help him later in the episode. But overall, that's kind of where the actual plot starts and ends, and the rest of it is all about character and tension and direction. But I really liked that about it. I think all that stuff is so well done and so successful, and it makes up for that fact that it doesn't really have that much going on story-wise. Also, this episode, I think, reminded me so much about why I loved Burke in the first episode so much and why he was my favorite character at first. I think there's a lot of positivity and a lot of empathy that we get to see from him in this episode with him and another character that I'll talk about in a little bit. And so all in all, I really enjoyed this episode a lot. I was so taken aback by how much I loved it. It's the first time I felt this enthusiastic about an episode of the show since episode 3, which is why it's my favorite since then, if not my favorite overall. So yeah, I think it's a great episode. I hope that there are more episodes of the show that are on this level of quality, that has the character development, that has the intrigue, that has some of the themes that this touches on as executed as well. But yeah, I really loved this episode, and now I want to talk all about why. So as I just mentioned a little bit ago, the big thing I loved about this episode was that we get a full Galen-centric episode. And I think this episode in particular, because of that and because of everything we get with him, it cements him to me as my favorite character of the show. It was going back and forth between him and Burke, but I think this episode, at least for now, really cemented it for me. I love Galen in this episode. I love the humor they continue to bring with him. I love the sweetness and the empathy, but also that sternness that Roddy McDowall brings. I think all of that stuff is tapped into through Roddy McDowall, through the direction, through the story, and through the character. I really loved Galen and all the stuff that he's doing in this episode with trying to help out his friends, with trying to reason with Kyra. And that's another thing that I loved so much in this episode because of Galen. I liked the relationship between Galen and Kyra. It's such an endearing, such an emotionally moving, very sweet-natured relationship. There's tension there, both, positive and negative tension, but I really enjoyed that dynamic between those characters. And I think Kyra is just a character in general who I really loved, and I was not expecting to enjoy her as much as I did. She's actually probably my favorite new character that's gotten introduced in the show so far. I mean, maybe I'm forgetting about somebody, but I really loved her, and I could tell kind of where they were going with her, but it really pays off in the end. I think Jacqueline Scott, who played the character, did a really excellent job in this role. I know that most likely she's not going to show up again just because I've kind of figured out how this show works by now, but I would have loved to have seen more of her in a future episode. It's probably not going to happen. I hope I'm wrong, but it's probably not going to happen. And I would have loved to see the relationship between Galen and Kyra explored more, because I think there's so much more to do there. I think there's so much chemistry there. I think that it's not a romance, but it's I don't know what you would call it, kind of like two people that clearly still have some sort of feelings for each other that can't be together, but they can come to mutual understanding and they can be friendly with each other and they can care for each other. And I really enjoyed watching that. I liked seeing that play out on screen. And then the character of Kyra also opens up this episode to diving into some more interesting social themes that the show has touched on here and there. And there's been a couple episodes that have done it better than others, but I think this episode so far is the most interesting in terms of social commentary. There's questions raised heavily about religion and traditions and that kind of stuff versus scientific truth, and what does and doesn't exist, what is and isn't real, what is proven evidence versus religious beliefs and religious ideologies and traditional beliefs and stuff. And I like that they play with that, and I like that they really leaned into that towards the end of this episode with the book and Dr. Leander questioning everything he really knows, and same with Kyra. I like that kind of stuff. I really hope that the show continues to tap into more of that kind of stuff. It's some of the stuff that has always been the most fascinating to me about the original Planet of the Apes movies. So I loved that we get more of that. I love that it's also touched on a bit in the scene with Zaius and Urko, which I'll talk about in a little bit more later, but I really liked a lot of the themes this episode touched on, and I liked the way it explored them. I also think that, and this is something I also mentioned up top, that this episode is heavy on tension and character dynamics, much more than plot and story, and I think it's really well executed. I think that stuff is why I love this episode so much. I think it's a very well directed episode. Specifically, the surgery scene during the last third of the episode, the tension throughout that entire sequence is incredibly well done. It's incredibly impressive, especially for a 1970s TV show. I was pretty much on the edge of my seat during that entire scene, just waiting to see what was going to happen. For all I knew, Virdon dies at the end of the episode. Is the blood transfusion going to work? I had all these questions. I was really curious what was going to happen, and it paid off, and I thought it was really, really well done. Speaking of the blood transfusion, you have the quote-unquote evil girl, who by the end of the episode we learn her name is Arna, and I really liked this character. I thought she was very empathetic. I thought she was very likable, even though she doesn't really have that much dialogue until the last, I'd say, third of the episode. But I don't know, I really enjoyed her, and I also, more particularly, I really enjoyed the dynamic that is developed between Burke and Arna, and it's something that, again, made me remember why I love the character of Burke so much. I think his empathy and his positivity really shine and really are brought to the surface in this episode with how he's treating and talking to Arna and trying to make her understand that she's not evil, that there's no curse, that she's not this terrible, worthless, lesser of a human being, that she's just as equal as anybody else. And I like that about this relationship between the two. I love that about what Burke does, and I like that about the character of Arna. I think think it makes her very empathetic, and I think the actress does a very good job as well. And then when it comes to the other new character, Dr. Leander, I didn't love him quite as much as I like Kyra, and I was a little on the fence with him at first, and I thought he was just going to be another one of these apes who's just kind of thick-headed and doesn't really listen to anybody, but he shows himself as one of these people of science who's opening his mind and willing to listen to others. And by the end of the episode, I was really engaged with him, and I was like, you know what, I actually like this guy. I think he has a solid development throughout this episode, so I really enjoyed him as well. And then something I mentioned a little bit ago, but the Zaius and Urko stuff, there's not a lot of them in this episode, but they are there, and I really like their scenes together, particularly the scene towards the end of the episode where the two of them are discussing the book that was stolen. I think there's some interesting dialogue there that again taps into those themes I was mentioning earlier about religion, about science, about humans versus apes and all that kind of stuff. And for the first time in a while, I think it establishes these characters and brings them back to feeling like a looming threat, which is something that I haven't felt for at least 2 or 3 episodes. And so I was glad that that was put back into this episode, and I hope that continues. Whether or not they eventually do get some kind of payoff with that, I don't really know. I doubt they will, but it was just nice to see that they are still established and still feeling like a threat throughout this show. As for issues with this episode, I don't have really anything major or anything even that much of a negative, really. I will say the pacing, I think in the first half of the episode, it's a little bit slow, but I think it pays off by the end with all the stuff with the surgery scene, with everything with Zaius and Urko, with everything with Galen and Kyra and the doctor and all that stuff going down. So it was a little slow to get into, but I think it really pays off by the end of it. And then when it comes to the character of Arna's father, I found him a little annoying, at least for the majority of the episode, just because he was one of these characters that's so obsessed and so convinced of their own religious ideologies and with things like curses and blood being evil and all that kind of stuff. But by the end, I didn't completely dislike him. I was just mildly annoyed by him throughout the first, I'd say 2/3 of the episode. But overall, I really loved episode 7, The Surgeon. I think it is quite possibly the best of the show so far. I think it has a great balance of themes that are really interesting, tension, solid filmmaking, effective filmmaking, and really strong character moments. And I think that this episode in particular, along with episode 3, are a perfect example of the best of what this show can be at its peak. And I hope that there are more episodes like it. We are officially halfway through the show now, so there's another 7 episodes to go. I don't know how many more episodes are going to be able to be on this level of quality. I hope there's at least a few, just because it's been pretty inconsistent so far. You have a couple episodes I love that are like this. You have a handful of episodes that I think are pretty good or just okay, and 1 or 2 episodes that I'm just like, I wasn't really into. So it's been a little bit all over the place for me. I am enjoying the show overall, but I do hope that the show continues to have more quality episodes just like this one, which is something that I would enjoy very much. And so hopefully that is the case with the next episode of the show, which I will talk about next week. But I want to know what you guys have to say about episode 7. What did you think of it? What did you think about the characters of Kyra and Leander? What did you think about the relationship between Kyra and Galen? Did you like that this was such a Galen heavy episode? Did you like all the stuff going on with Arna and Burke like I did? Did you feel that heavy tension the way that I did? I really want to know all of you guys' thoughts. I thought this was a fantastic episode, and I really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorites of the series so far. Again, I will be back next week with my review for episode 8 of the show, but until then, thank you so much for checking out today's video here on Ape Nation. If you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things apes. I'll catch you in the next one, so until then, goodbye.